AMD on top, AI goes quantum, MinIO AIStor, Amazon employee data moves on out, get your ass to Marslink, Google's AI code, Amazon isn't going nuclear, and we take a closer look at the stress in the cybersecurity market in this episode of the Gestalt IT Rundown. Hey everyone, welcome to the Gestalt IT Rundown for November 13th. My name is Tom Hollingsworth, and I hope that you are enjoying a snack right now, perhaps some kind of a pizza. Maybe you should go on with the works. Well, I take that back. Everything but anchovies. And that's because it literally is National Pizza with the Works except Anchovies Day, because I don't know of anybody that eats anchovies on pizza. Maybe my esteemed colleague and co-host, Mr. Alistair Cook. Are you an anchovy person or are you not?
I am actually an anchovy person. I like the umami and the tang of having anchovies and things, whether it's a nice pizza or whether it's a Caesar salad with all of the trimmings. But of course, we don't want to have those anchovies in our Indian pudding because, of course, today is also National Indian Pudding Day.
You know, it's starting to sound like this is all just going to be food related. But I can also tell you that all of the news stories in this episode of the Rundown do contain MSG. So if that's one of your things, too bad, because we need all the umami that we can get today. And we're going to actually start off with a conversation that's going on around some very big companies out there, and that would be AMD and NVIDIA. Because it turns out that Lisa Su has been the CEO of AMD for the last 10 years, and she really has turned the company around by successfully entering the data center CPU and GPU markets, aside from their traditional consumer focus. It secured major revenues. It has positioned AMD as a very serious competitor to Intel and NVIDIA. With record high revenues, rapid growth in the Instinct GPU business, and increased sales in data center products, it looks like AMD is on track to potentially achieve parity with NVIDIA in the data center GPU sales market and potentially rival Intel in server CPU revenue in 2025 or possibly even 2026. I know that sounds a little bit tongue-in-cheek when you consider that NVIDIA keeps battling with Apple to be the world's most valuable company. But are we seeing a situation where perhaps AMD could challenge for one of the crowns that NVIDIA doesn't have locked up?
I think one of the big things we've seen with AMD is that they've actually been able to execute on some things that particularly, there's been that long time rivalry with Intel, and Intel seems to have missed the AI accelerator kind of market. And so AMD seems to have really taken that space, along with, of course, the whole hyper-integrated everything on the CPU kind of feel, with that massive scale out and cores and basically all of the bits, huge amounts of I/O attached to their CPUs. They've just had this pace of innovation that's led them up along the way. While we've seen NVIDIA climb through the sky on the back of GPU use for cryptocurrency mining and AI, I think we've seen AMD come in and actually take a lot of ground for doing general purpose compute. And a lot of the growth has been in those more solid, dependable, less bubble risk kind of use cases. So I think in terms of seeing them rivaling some of these other organizations, it's not that they're directly competing with the things those organizations are doing. They're carving their own path to delivering quite a lot of value to their customers. And fundamentally, that's how you make a successful business. In a related field, quantum computing and AI seem like a recipe for headlines and funding. Bob Suter, an experienced quantum computing expert and a part of the Futurum group, suggests that quantum computing might solve a whole set of problems better than AI does, but that quantum and AI aren't really going to merge together as a single thing, especially since quantum computing is so new. Seems like we might end up with quantum computing that's really an accelerator for specialized computation tasks. So you ready for your quantum offload?
You know, I'm going to need to drink quantum amounts of alcohol to make this make sense. Bob Suter is a very intelligent man, and I didn't even know that people were trying to say quantum AI was a thing, but thank God Bob came in and said, that's not a thing. Don't make that a thing. That's dumb. Here's the deal. Traditional computers have a lot of utility still. The fact that we're still using laptops, we're still using cell phones, we're still using servers should tell you that we have built a lot of our workflows around those computers. There are things that they're not really good at, though, and that's like massive amounts of computations, specific things like modeling complex systems. It turns out computers are actually really bad at the weather because there's so many variables that go into how the weather can be modeled that it's actually really difficult. It just takes massive amounts of compute power. And so another thing is calculating states or factoring numbers. I mean, one of the reasons why quantum has jumped to the top of the list is because of that ridiculous report that came out about a month ago saying that the Chinese had factored a quantum key. They haven't really factored a key yet. But people are now looking, well, I have quantum over here and I have AI over here. What if I did quantum AI? Then I could get twice as much funding from the venture capitalists. And that's what this is to me. This is somebody trying to say that they're doing this so they can double dip into the funding pool. Quantum will not make your AI any better because there's no amount of computation that makes AI better. It's all about data inputs. And we have optimized our compute clusters to take that data and crunch it as fast as possible. Like Bob was saying, it's going to take millions of qubits in order to get to a point where this could even be feasible. I want to stress that. Millions. We're doing good if we can get a quantum computer now to have 1,000 qubits. So you're talking what, 3 or 4 orders of magnitude higher? Not times, orders of magnitude. That's not going to happen anytime soon. And I don't care how much money is being poured into the AI space. It's not enough to break the laws of physics. So I'm glad that Bob came out with this. And anytime anybody tells you that their quantum AI is a thing, or that, this is becoming a big deal or that's becoming a big deal, you should ask yourself a very important question. Are they looking for money? Because if the answer is yes, I'm going to guess that it's not really a thing. We've been covering MinIO on the Rundown for a number of years now, and they've been a frequent Tech Field Day presenter as well. Now they've introduced their next generation enterprise product labeled AIStor. This release adds I'm sorry, that's not AIStor, that's AIStor. Let me try that again. We've been covering MinIO on the Rundown for years now, and they've been a frequent Tech Field Day presenter as well. Now they've introduced their next generation enterprise product dubbed AIStor. This release adds complex AI storage stack from key management, console to catalog, and has more tricks up its sleeve. The new prompt object capability brings self-describing metadata. AI Hub is a drop-in replacement for Hugging Face, and S3 over RDMA challenges NFS over RDMA, not to mention GPU Direct. I want to turn this over to our friend and colleague Stephen Foskett to give us his take on this new version of the MinIO Enterprise Object Store. Stephen?
MinIO's open source version is well known and respected in the world, but of course their enterprise object store has found a lot of traction as well. In fact, MinIO is currently the object store of choice for some of the biggest implementations out there in the not just petabyte scale, but maybe even exabyte scale. So adding AI support capabilities is really not a surprise. That's something that a lot of the companies in the object storage, file storage, and even block storage world have been doing. But I was surprised to see a couple of things about this release. Number one, AIStor is their product. That is the enterprise product. It's not like there's this is some special version or something. This is the next generation of the MinIO product. That's not to mean that it's not useful if you're not using AI, by all means. In fact, a lot of these features are things that you may not need, but that may find themselves into other aspects of different non-AI workloads. But of course, the AI workloads are the big story here, and it seems likely that MinIO developed these with a few customers in mind. So let's take a look at a couple of them. First off, the prompt object concept is really kind of clever. Essentially, they have built in the ability for the API to describe itself. And this can be done either in a typical chatbot type window where you ask it about the data and it tells you about the data, or even sounds like it can be done programmatically through an API. not sure how that works, but it's pretty cool. I was surprised to see the AI Hub edition, since that's something that is, well, I would have guessed that it would be a standalone product, but I suppose the problem with developing a Hugging Face competitor is who's going to pay for it? Who's going to pay for the development effort? Who's going to support it? This way, it's entirely ready to go right out of the box for MinIO customers. Again, I imagine this was probably developed in response to specific customer demands, and it makes a lot of sense. I mean, if you're doing some proprietary AI model work, the last thing you want to do is to have to publish everything back up to Hugging Face. And this matches sort of how things are going on the DevOps world as well. I mean, a lot of people are using GitHub, but a lot of people are using private repositories as well. The last thing I want to hit on is this whole concept of S3 over RDMA. If you're not a storage nerd like me, essentially RDMA is a way to do direct memory access from a client to a server over a network. It's been used for a long time in a variety of different protocols. I was eagerly writing and covering Microsoft's SMB over RDMA as part of their SMB3 releases back well, before I started Tech Field Day, that's for sure. And lately, we've been seeing customers doing NFS over RDMA as well as a way to accelerate that protocol. S3 over RDMA was new to me, but it makes a lot of sense since so many AI applications are demanding incredible bandwidth and are using object storage protocols like S3. Still, I couldn't help but wonder if this is, again, a point solution for a particular customer, or if it portends more development from MinIO. I wouldn't be surprised, for example, to see them branch out into actual GPU Direct. I wouldn't be surprised to see S3 over RDMA become something that becomes part of the NVIDIA stack in the future. This is all speculation, obviously, nothing that MinIO has said. But the bottom line is they've basically built out their next generation platform as a way to support the biggest, the baddest, and the fastest AI applications, and that's pretty cool.
Well, thanks for that, Stephen. We appreciate your take. Now, I have a question for you out there. Doesn't Amazon have a public cloud platform that they use to build software and things for businesses? The reason why I ask that is because the people who work there might have inadvertently been embarrassed by a software platform. You've probably heard of it. It's called MoveIt. There was this massive cyber attack against the MoveIt platform over the last couple of years. And, it was basically used for file transfers and things like that, except some hackers got into it and it was used to transfer more than just files. We are now finding out that 2.8 million Amazon employees had information about them stolen. And of course, if it was stolen in the MoveIt file transfer, you can better believe that that data was moved into the hands of ransomware and cyber criminals who are probably going to do bad things with it because that's kind of what they do. Now, AIStor, what do you think about the fact that MoveIt is now seeming to bite the hand that feeds it?
Well, I think it's kind of ironic that Amazon, parent company to AWS, seems to have missed out on this idea of a shared responsibility model for security. What appears to have happened is that their entire employee directory was being transferred through MoveIt. And so this was employee contact details. This wasn't social security numbers, home addresses, and those kinds of things. But it was office locations and phone numbers, which is absolutely prime information for people who are going to start doing spear phishing attacks and a variety of other ways of social engineering to get inside your organization. So it's a bit of a concern that this has gone on. Now, to be clear, it's not just Amazon that have been hit by this. A whole bunch of other organizations have had their directories exposed because they had this common way of sharing directory information through MoveIt. Of course, we get concerned when it's clear text copies of this data being moved over a platform that it seems like Amazon and many other companies weren't taking as much responsibility for data security using these platforms as they might hope. Of course, nobody expected this massive secure file sharing platform to be massively exploited and compromised by large gangs. But clearly, if this sort of data is being transferred across a platform like MoveIt, it's going to be a target for attack. And so you've probably got to think about how you use it a little more than just it's all secure, it's somebody else's problem to make it secure, right? Security is never somebody else's problem. And I think that's fundamentally what's gone on in here. 2.8 million Amazon employees, that sounds to me like all of them. I don't know, haven't looked at the staffing levels at Amazon, but that's an awful lot of employees' information that's now available to people with very nefarious purposes. It's kind of scary. Of course, if you need a network to launch all kinds of social engineering attacks, maybe a globe-spanning wireless network like Starlink would be a good platform for that, although maybe it ought to be called Earthlink. That would make a bit more sense now that SpaceX is proposing a system in orbit around Mars that provides network connectivity all around Mars. Since Starlink provides connectivity around the Earth, maybe it should just be called Earthlink. Of course, SpaceX would like some NASA funding to deploy this network of communication satellites around Mars, which will of course be very helpful for Elon in his efforts to reach the red planets. Tom, would you go to the red planet if you had Marslink providing your internet connectivity?
Yeah, but I have an agreement that I'm not going if Elon's there. Here's the deal. First of all, I applaud your take on it, but you got to understand branding, AIStor. It's Starlink, right? Now, they can call it Marslink, but here's the deal. You've probably heard the saying, the cart before the horse. Well, this is buying all of the produce going into the cart before the horse. Like, here's the deal. When was the last time we had something on Mars? I mean, we have rovers there, and I believe one of them is still working. Question. We know that it's working, right? How do we know that it's still working? Oh, that's right, because NASA has communications infrastructure on Mars, and they use it to collect telemetry. You know what you can't do on Mars? Post an X update or host a video chat from another planet. That was what you would need Starlink for, or sorry, Marslink. But you know what we don't have on Mars? People, or infrastructure to support people, or even a floating space station. This, to me, if I'm in my not so humble opinion, is a poor attempt by a man who is absolutely obsessed with Mars to try to keep it in the news a little bit longer to see if he can get NASA to shake loose some funding. If I were NASA, you know what I would say? Start small. Why don't you put Starlink around the moon? Because we'll need to have a moon base at some point if we're going to start traveling to Mars on a regular basis. It's easier to get to Mars from the moon. It proves that we can live long-term in space. But it also is not Mars. So, I get it. If you want to spend your own money to put an entire, put all these Starlinks and Mars links, whatever the hell we're going to call them, in orbit, go right ahead. I do remember, though, that they tend to fall out of orbit every few years, though, and we constantly have to keep boosting more of them up there. Unless you're going to be getting into Mars orbit anytime in the next 2 years, I don't think you're going to need it. So, yeah, don't worry about that. AI is generating more than 25% of Google's code, according to Sundar Pichai. That 25% of code still needs to be reviewed by a human before it's accepted, so it's unclear exactly how much productivity Google is gaining by having AI writing all of their code. Now, we're starting to wonder whether or not organizations without Google's vast code base and extensive AI experience can gain any kind of value from having AI generating code. And it reminds me a lot of, having an AI read your essay and write it for you, and then you have to go back and read it yourself to make sure that it didn't use delve too many times and get hit by the secret ways that we use to detect AI. When in reality, what it really meant was that you only saved about 20 minutes by having a system write it for you anyway. So I kind of wonder, Google is a huge proponent of AI. Google, more than anybody else, knows how to write an AI algorithm that can write code, and they're still having their people look at it. So are we further away from having AI replace us all than we might have thought?
I think you hit on a really big element in here, right? Google has all of the things that should make it possible for them to generate a code using AI, to take away all of that boring, repetitive effort that developers go through. And yet, still only 25% of the code that's being written is being written by AIs. And as we saw, all of that code has to be human reviewed. Google doesn't even trust its AI to generate code well enough that it can be put into production without human review. I think there's some really interesting lessons in there. Is fundamentally we're not seeing a huge amount of development improvement simply from having suggestions of new lines of code. That maybe that's not the best way to improve developer productivity with AI, simply suggesting here's the code that you should write. Particularly since a lot of these AI-generated code tools, the developer still has to prompt it and say, I need something that does this. And the quality of the code can be pretty variable out of that. So the quality of that prompt engineering of telling the AI what I want to do is a huge factor in whether these tools will work. Now, that makes it, again, like software development, more of a craft than it is a science. And that doesn't feel like a lot of progress to me. We really need this to be science, where we're describing the problems that need to be solved, and the AI is providing the solutions to that. This is the dream that we have for AI, but it doesn't seem to be quite the reality most people have for AI in code generation. Of course, AI might have a wider use in software development, because software development is not really all about writing code. That's only one of the elements. There's a whole lot of sort of coordination, style correctness. There's a whole lot of project coordination and ensuring that we're not reinventing the wheel. One of those classic things, if a developer doesn't know somebody else has written some code that solves this problem, so they write new code to solve exactly the same problem. This is the kind of spaces where AI might be useful for us, the ability to know all of this context from everything that we've ever written. And again, Google's got a huge code base. Of course, if the code base that we're starting with is not the highest quality, then the suggestions we're going to get from it is not the highest quality. As you said earlier, it's all about data in. So if they use my code base of everything I've ever written to train an AI, it's going to write some pretty terrible code that might sometimes run. So yeah, it still seems really early on this journey towards AI augmented software development, and we really seem to be at the early stages. Of course, for all of this AI, we're going to need massive data centers, and Amazon's data centers are requiring more and more power for this AI ramp up. One of the ways that providers are trying to increase power to these data centers is by reviving the nuclear energy industry in the US. For operational plants that are still in place, companies like Amazon are trying to be close to those locations to draw more power from these reactors, and possibly waiting for some of the older plants to be refurbished, reactivated, brought online. The US Federal Energy Regulation Commission just issued an order that rejected Amazon's request to draw an additional 180 megawatts of power from the Susquehanna power plant. Now, the data center is built by Talon Energy. It was acquired by Amazon back in March, so it's an Amazon asset, and was co-located next to the plant. So Amazon was building this data center next to it. But the Federal Energy Regulation Commission cited issues with what would happen if the contract for the Talon Center preempted power delivery to the rest of the grid. What if AWS or Amazon's demands for power meant that there were blackouts in neighboring cities? I certainly wouldn't choose to live close to an Amazon data center if that was a risk. How about you, Tom? Do you want to be near Amazon?
Oh, come on. What's the worst that could happen? I'll just glow in the dark. First of all, I just want to make sure that everybody knows. And if you haven't watched Kyle Hill on YouTube, he has done an amazing job of kind of talking about the nuclear industry. It's safe. Like, the problem is 3 Mile Island melted down in the 70s, and it wasn't even really a meltdown. It was just a release of gas. We haven't had a major nuclear accident on the level of Chernobyl. And I doubt we ever will, because if you've ever watched Chernobyl on HBO, you know that there were a lot of other reasons why that happened. But more importantly, we still get a lot of our power from nuclear. And the Susquehanna plant is actually running. And it's providing about 300 megawatts of power. And they wanted to bump it to 180. They wanted to bump it to 480 total. And they wanted to draw off 180 megawatts of power for this Talon Energy plant that they purchased. The problem is that nuclear power plants are rated for certain amounts of power, right? And that has to do with the fact that they are powered by unstable isotopes. So you can make them generate a whole lot of power, and then you blow them up. And so obviously there's like a little bit of a cushion that goes into it, and they want to make sure that they're able to safely provide this. And it's one of the reasons why they're having to go back and refurbish these old reactors. It's because they really haven't been touched in decades. But an important point here is what the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, I think FERC is what they're called, said in regards to not the safety of the plant, but power draw. So let's say that you have 480 megawatts coming out of the plant, and you are contractually obligated to deliver 180 megawatts to this data center, which of course is like crunching the numbers for the AI that's going to take over the planet or whatever we're developing this for. Well, what happens when the power draw goes down? What happens when Clark Griswold turns on all of his Christmas lights and you see the dials go down? Well, who gets the cut of the power? Are we going to preempt the data center to be able to supply the residential neighborhoods? Or are we going to have to cut the residential neighborhoods off because the AI model needs to be fed? It wasn't clear. And the problem is that in a situation like that, if it's not clear, then everyone's going to be an aggrieved party if their power gets cut. So I think FERC did the right thing here by saying you can't do this until you have it in very clear writing what happens when the worst case scenario occurs. Because if there's one thing that I can tell you about working around people in the nuclear industry, they have 3 worst case scenarios in their head at all times, and they know how to fix all of them, which is why 3 Mile Island was not a massive meltdown. And even in the case of Chernobyl, it could have been a whole lot worse if they hadn't, implemented their worst case scenario as quickly as they did. All right, we had a story that we wanted to take a closer look at, and it's tracking some larger trends in the cybersecurity industry, because one of the biggest things that we're dealing with right now is the fact that we need better pay, right? Everybody wants to get better pay. And pay rates for people in IT security are rising faster than inflation. That's good, right? But do you know what else is rising faster than inflation? Rates of burnout and stress, because that's kind of how it works. A survey of UK security professionals, which we will link in the show notes, revealed that the fast pace of modern security and the risk of unknown failure is causing skilled practitioners to decide that maybe they should just go open a hamburger stand somewhere. Would yet more pay fix this problem? Or is there another way to address IT security staff retention and maybe convince people that they don't need to say F it and move to the beach?
Yeah, I think the real challenge here is that stress that you get as an IT practitioner, as a particular security practitioner, who is looking after a big target. Now, we talked about MoveIt earlier. Imagine you were the head of security, or just a security operations drone there, and day after day, you have to be right every single time as a security professional. The attacker only has to be right once to get around you. And so there's a huge amount of stress involved in just looking after these targets. What for the attackers are targets. And more money doesn't make that stress go away. It doesn't make you sleep better at night when you're concerned about these kinds of attacks that are going on, and whether you might actually wake up in the morning or get paged in the middle of the night for an intrusion, and that the company may lose large amounts of money, and potentially you could lose your job along the way as well, despite having done everything to your best ability. So I think we've got some real challenges around there, around retaining skilled and experienced IT security practitioners, keeping them in those roles, but keeping them from getting burnt out by that constant pressure. There has to be a systematic approach to it, where we're not relying on the human's skill, experience, and knowledge every minute. That we need to be moving towards places where we're aggregating knowledge, and we're having systems that are responsive and, dare I say it, using AI kind of tools to recognize behaviors that are abnormal, rather than having to have a human say, that blip there looks wrong, or this log message looks wrong. Relying on humans and pressuring humans for this does not end well, particularly if you're looking for somebody highly skilled. Right? Lots of pressure on somebody low skilled, well, they're relatively replaceable. But lots of pressure on somebody high skilled, they're very hard to replace. And this is the sort of thing that we've seen for a long time. And I had one of the first people that recruited me, then 6 months later retired to go and grow flowers in a greenhouse. And yeah, he had an awesome amount of skill, and customers would say, we'll pay travel time from his greenhouse to get him back again. But he didn't want to come back because he had been burnt out by all the pressure for so long. And this is really what's going on in there. Tom, you're way closer to the security industry than I am. Are you seeing better tooling coming along, or are we still extensively relying on the real-time skills and experience of individual practitioners?
One of the problems is that what we're seeing is that attacks are still taking place, and they're being done by people. And people are very creative when it comes to how to get into a system. And the tools can only keep up with things as they notice them. I took a security briefing yesterday from a company that was talking about doing constant analysis of the threat environment and looking for ways that people could potentially get in. But, you mentioned the old axiom of, the attackers only have to get lucky once. The problem is that we have to be on call waiting for that time to occur. And we're not living in a world anymore where somebody accidentally gains access to the Pentagon. Oh no, he's going to get tackled by the MPs and the Marines. If I can slip in undetected, I can cart off massive amounts of data that I'm storing in places. I can plant, remote access systems to be able to get back in to pull that stuff out. I can insert code into the production line to basically have unfettered access whenever I want. And if this is starting to make your skin crawl, realize, and I kid you not, if I wanted to put a story about a data breach in the rundown every week, I'd have more than enough to pick from, and I'd burn everybody out. Oh, look, another data breach. Oh, look, somebody else's credentials got stolen. And that is annoying enough for us to deal with from a news perspective. Think about the people who actually have to deal with that impact. And that's why they're getting burned out. One reason why is because it's still considered to be way too general. Like think about this. If a surgeon had to do surgery on every part of the body, if there were no specialized brain surgeons and heart surgeons and all of those things, they'd get burned out really fast too. But instead, you can get people who, like brain surgeons, they focus on one specific area of the body, and brain surgeons don't do brain surgery their entire life. They're more or less required to retire after about age 35 because their motor skills get too bad. They can't work in that environment. So they go back to being a regular surgeon that works on other things, or maybe even they just decide they're going to retire and be like a regular doctor. And we don't really have that career path in IT because, as you mentioned, the more knowledge we accumulate, the more skills that we have, the more likely it is that we're going to be responsible for fixing everything or for training our replacements. And that creates just as much burnout as anything else. And I know that there are a lot of organizations out there that will throw money at a problem and say, oh, well, it's just your job to be stressed out, so you don't have anything to worry about. Well, let me ask you this question, people out there who are throwing money at the problem. If you pay your security analyst as well as you pay your CEO does not have to fundamentally change the way they do their job every 9 months because there's new attacks going on and AI is coming online to do all of this stuff. They still pretty much do the same thing that they've always done. Your security people are constantly having to retrain and do other stuff. And I feel like there's no amount of money that we can pay them that will offset what's happening in their brains when they finally reach a point where they're like, I'm done and I can't deal with this anymore.
And people have a limited capacity to deal with stress. Now, it's individually variable. But I guess if you're expecting to burn people out over the course of 5 to 7 years, and you say that's the lifespan of your career, then you need to pay them like brain surgeons and pay them well enough that they can go to some lower stress job, possibly go into a padded room at the end of 7 to 10 years of being an on-call IT security professional. But this just feels like a problem area that is ripe for new solutions. I do like some of the ideas around sharing security information across multiple customers, being able to leverage sort of a hive mind of security. But the problem is every organization is sufficiently different that the security needs are hard to normalize across all of the different organizations and bring into place. And then, of course, as you say, the innovation. Somebody who is desperately hungry because they have no money and they have a computer to make these attacks. This is a person who is going to find innovative ways of making some money, and this is where the beginning, at least, of the ransomware and most of these malware people is this desperate people in desperate situations. And then if they're successful, if they're good at it, they become very rich people in very different situations. But you know, the security team, the actual in-house security team, don't get to make that $1 billion and retire from a single good defense. You don't make money by defending, and that's fundamentally one of the ways that we end up with these highly stressed teams and struggling to retain good people because we burn them out.
Here's a reminder. Take all the money that you're using to give people free credit monitoring because your systems got breached and give that to your security professionals, and you might get breached a little less because they don't have to worry about anything other than doing their jobs. Speaking of doing our jobs, we're very happy to be doing our job with you guys here. And I wanted to give you a little update on some of the stuff we've got going on over the next couple of weeks as we round out 2024. Right now, Stephen is out in Salt Lake City, Utah at KubeCon, and he's going to be doing App Dev Field Day 2. We've gotten some great presentations already, and we have a couple more coming up. So make sure you tune into techfieldday.com after this episode to check out all the videos. I'm going to be out in Silicon Valley next week for the final Mobility Field Day of the year. We're going to be hearing from Nile and Cisco, and we're going to have some great delegates joining us there. And then we're going to take the holidays off. We're going to eat some turkey and all that other stuff. And then we're going to be back in 2025 with the very first event, AI Field Day 6, which will be at the end of January, the 29th and 30th. And then Cloud Field Day will be taking place February 19th and 20th. You should always check techfieldday.com for the latest updates of events that we're adding to the calendar because we're always putting new stuff out there. And we also hope that you'll be joining us over on gestaltit.com, where you can follow along on the show notes for this episode. And you can find all kinds of other fun stuff, great videos that we recorded, past episodes of The Rundown, which you can find also on our YouTube channel at youtube.com/gestaltitvideo. We hope that you'll subscribe to our podcast feed if maybe you want to listen to us as opposed to just watch us, because we always try to talk a little less with our hands and more with our words. But we will, we always post the latest episodes there. And don't forget that we will also be simulcasting on a lot of other things for TechStrong TV, as well as our other Futurum Group properties. And we'll be back next Wednesday. Well, Stephen will be back next Wednesday. I will be out doing stuff. But we will be bringing you more IT news, see who got some stuff crammed in right before the holidays. We will be taking Thanksgiving off, but we will be back with more episodes shortly thereafter. I want to, on behalf of Al and myself, thank you very much for tuning in this week. We hope that you have a great one, and we will see you for the rundown next week.